questions for you. Number one is, what are the major factors that are influencing tenant choice right now?
Well, I think they're changing, particularly in London, where I do most of my business. Well, I think we're entering a new phase of development in the capital, one that has probably seen the end of iconic towers for a while, and the focus is now really shifting towards buildings that represent long-term assets, but particularly those that are fit for purpose, i.e. provide things that tenants arguably value more than, for example, expensive facades. So we're looking at a couple of proposals where we're looking to save money on things that we can save money on without detriment to the quality of the architecture, such as structures and external walls, and investing that in the internal workspace, making it more flexible, more comfortable, more fun to work in, and therefore creating spaces which affect the occupier's bottom line.
Second question is, to what extent are green rating labels, LEED, and et cetera, influencing your client choices and rents?
I don't think it's ever been the number one priority for tenants, and that's not because tenants don't have a sustainability agenda. Increasingly they do, and they want to be seen to be in a green building. But it's difficult to differentiate between towers from a sustainability perspective. You know, the bottom line these days is that you have to achieve BREEAM Excellent as a baseline. Therefore, there are a lot of buildings competing at the same level, which is, I think, another reason why the future will develop into something different, where towers will demonstrate sustainability from a different perspective other than legislation.
There is a fair degree of skepticism out there as to just how effective LEED is, and aside from it being a PR and a selling point, if it really is a legitimate cost savings or cost effective. Any opinion? Yeah,
I mean, BREEAM and LEED, you know, when you look at the total development cost, it's pretty small beer. It doesn't cost that much as a premium to achieve, you know, a decent rating in either of those pieces of legislation. And I know of at least one major fund in the UK which is challenging BREEAM and is looking to actually speak to those that are set to devise the next instalment of BREEAM and say, look, we don't want this to be a box-ticking exercise. We want our buildings to be truly sustainable, and there are other factors which BREEAM and other pieces of legislation don't cover, and you know, the long-term performance of the building is one of those.
Are there any non-typical functions that have worked well or would work well in a tall building?
Well, one presentation I went to here yesterday, which was talking about vertical farming, which has been in the academic press for a long time. I think it's very interesting. You know, at a certain level, when you look at forecasts of population growth and the constraints that's placing on our ability to feed that increasing and urbanizing population, it's got to be an issue that we have to address. And you know, maybe there is a solution to farm in tall buildings. I think the other thing I'd say is the mix of uses. You know, there is a sort of developing typology in the high-rise world where we're looking at different ways of incorporating different mixes into the same building. But also, I think one thing I'm particularly interested in actually is producing buildings that are adaptable. So we've got one scheme, for example, we're looking at where we're future-proofing the building from a structural perspective, so that structure could be fully adaptable, and where there are offices in the original proposal that could change to hotel, for example, in 10, 15 years' time, and vice versa on other elements of the building. You know, and so what we're doing is we're keeping the structure for not 50 years, but 150, 500 years. And, you know, that's one of the main contributors to, you know, the embodied energy of the building in the first place.
What multi-purpose buildings, and you, of course, cited farming as one thing, but what other multi-purposes can be added into buildings? Any come to mind that aren't presently being used?
I guess from a tall building perspective, there aren't many examples I can think of from a cultural perspective. I guess the other one that just springs to mind is that you look at the Shard that I've been working on for 10 years. That's next to what people tell me is the tallest hospital in the world. Guy's Hospital. It's not the prettiest building in the world. I wonder whether there is room for another tall hospital.